Good morning, Rabotai. Welcome to Breakfast on the Class. Breakfast on the Class today is dedicated in loving memory of Ms. Lily Safra. Her philanthropies reached so many throughout the entire world. Breakfast on the Class is also dedicated by Mauricio Sion in honor of his wife Laura's birthday. Laura Bat Leah up to 120, with loads of health, nachat, and blessings. Your kindness and care for other people is above and beyond. You're an inspiration to us all. Mazal Tov. Congratulations. Finally, the week of Cobra was sponsored by David E. Ash in honor of you and your substantial capacity to good today and every day. My friends, I want to focus in on one idea, on one parasha, one idea in this week's parasha. The pasuk tells us that the Jews, the Jewish nation begins, as I just mentioned in our little kind of pre-class discussion. The Jewish nation really, it begins as a family. America is an agglomeration of many different cultures and faiths, all running away to escape persecution from various places. It has the Native Americans that were on the land before anyone got here. It has the people from the Mayflower. It has people from Spain, from Portugal, from France. And that's why you have different territories, if you will, and different flavors in America, because each one of those are cities with their origin. New England is from, that's what it was. You have a place in America called Toledo, after cities in Spain. You have Louisville, down in various places. You have as well New Orleans. These places, Orleans, where does it come from? They were French colonies. So each one of these places came together to be able to create this thing called America. So when you talk about Americans, Americans are from where? From everywhere. But Jews primarily, although there are also converts also that join the people here and there, but that's a minority as compared to the main body of Am Yisrael. So, in the Jewish national story, if you will, Jews are one family. As the pasuk says, Kulanu bnei ish echad anachnu. All of us are the son of one man. Come from Yaakov Avinu, right? So the crazy thing is, the lessons that we learn about family here are true about the entire Am Yisrael. They're true about family members in our own immediate family nucleus. But the lessons perhaps need a little bit of review, because we seem to forget these lessons. Someone asked me once, Rabbi, it's so interesting that every year in Judaism we talk about the same parashah again and again and again. Why don't we just learn new things? I said, why, have you learned the lessons yet? Okay, so let's take a beat and read a pasuk that is instructive, upsetting, inspiring. Yisrael ahavet Yosef, and Yisrael loved Yosef mikol banav. He had a very strong connection with Yosef. After all, Yosef was the son of Rachel, his beloved wife, the wife that died in childbirth. Yosef looked like his mother, but also looked like his father. So perhaps there's kind of a deeper connection than just a father-son connection. It's also the missing of the love of his life. So Yisrael ahavet Yosef. We're given different reasons why he loved him so strongly. One reason the Targum says Kibar Hakim, because he was very wise, the wisest of all the children. Another understanding is Ki ben Zekunimu, because he was a child born to him at his later age. He was the last child born. Everyone asks, what do you mean? If Ben Zekunim was the reason why he loved him, then he should have loved Benjamin. Benjamin was younger. So I often think that there's a lot to learn about these stories from our experience in the world. Sometimes we don't think about the people in the Torah as people. Now, no doubt they were angels in terms of their spiritual prowess, but they were still people. Like, Yaakov loved Rachel. So that love was the love of a husband for his wife. But of course it was much more than that, but it was also that. Okay? And I'm thinking to myself, yes, Yosef was Ben Zekunim, Binyamin was a even later Ben Zekunim. But Binyamin was born with such a traumatic experience hanging on his head. Binyamin is the reason, perhaps, is the moment that Rachel dies. She dies in childbirth with Binyamin. I can imagine that Ben Zekunim, he loved Yosef, but he would have loved Binyamin for that reason, for Ben Zekunim, but Binyamin, there was this traumatic experience attached to him. Now again, are we imagining things? Yes. Do we say that these things had a role? Can we explain? Maybe. But the point, my friends, is that ultimately, for all of these reasons, or any of these reasons, Yaakov loved Yosef with an exceedingly great amount of love as compared to the other brothers. Ki ben zekunim ulo, ve'asa lo ketonet pasim, and he made him this coat of many colors. Vayurechav, and the brothers saw ki oto ahav avihem, that he loved, that him, their father, loved mikol echav, from all of them. Vayisneu oto, and they hated him. Lo yachlu dabero l'shalom, and they could not speak to him the shalom and peace. Now you look at this, and perhaps your brain is taking you in a certain direction. But Rashi explains something wild on this pasuk. Rashi says, what does this mean? Lo yichalu dabro l'shalom, they couldn't speak to him the shalom. He says that the brothers were possessed of a genuine and authentic character traits. They were people who, if they didn't like you, they didn't pretend in conversation to be your best friend and then stab you in the back. They were echad bapeh ve'echad balev. The way they were inside their heart was the way they were outside. There were no games, there were no manipulations, right? There's a very famous line, I think they say in the name of Oscar Wilde. It says, a true friend stabs you in the front. Right? Yeah, I see the guy, I know he's coming, I know he don't like me. He tells me things as they are. Not echad bapeh ve'echad balev, that he's different in the way he feels inside and the way he speaks outside. So the Torah is communicating here something, but on a specific level, it's telling us that the brothers couldn't speak to him because you know what? If they would speak to him, they would speak to him negatively, and they didn't want to do that. And they also didn't want to pretend that they weren't upset with him. So therefore, lo yachalu dabro l'shalom. So I look at this Rashi and I see something very powerful for human interaction. And that's perhaps we read the pasuk a little bit differently. We read it with a comma. Velo yachelu dabero, comma. They couldn't speak to him. Why? L'shalom. The purpose of not speaking to him was for the sake of shalom. You know, oftentimes, a person finds or feels a certain way and they say something in conversation, or they say something at the Shabbat table, or they say something at a family farah, and you know what? All it does is blow things up further. Sometimes, for the sake of shalom, what's important to do is to keep your mouth shut, is not to say anything. I'll never forget the power of this lesson. Because really, the Torah tells us something very different in another place. The Torah tells us, Hocheach tochiach et amitecha, you shall rebuke your friend, ve'lo tisa alav chet, and don't carry a sin for him. Al Chachamim explain that this idea of hocheach tochiach et amitecha is not to be seen in isolation. It's to be seen in the pesukim that surround it. The pasuk says, Lo tisna et achicha bilvavecha. Don't hate your brother in your heart. Right next to that commandment, it says, Hocheach tochiach tamitecha. Rambam learns that there's an isur from the Torah to hate your brother in your heart. There's a machloket rishonim actually as to what this means. One opinion says, Lo tisna et achicha bilvavecha means, if I hate you in my heart, and I come up to you and I tell you, you know something? You are the scum of the earth. You're the worst person that was ever been born. I still remember there was an episode of The Honeymooners when Ralph thinks he's getting fired. And he mails a letter to the boss, to the owner of the bus company. And he iterates the letter and reiterates the letter again and again and again and again. And the other guy's writing it, and he tells it. And the one guy goes, you ought to turn in your membership card to the human race. Right? And he writes him this scathing letter. And finally, at the end, he mails this letter, and he finds out, he goes to the bus company, he finds out that the reason why they told him to turn in his uniform is not because he's being fired, because he got a raise. And he comes home and he gets so excited, he says, I got a raise, and then all of a sudden he remembers it, he goes, the letter! Remember that? That's the end. The letter. My friends, so what's better to do? You're so upset at someone. Do you go and tell the guy, turn in your membership card to the human race? Right? Is that what you should be saying? Machloket between the Rishonim. One opinion says, if I actually come to you to your face and I say, there's nothing lower than you. The core of the earth is not lower than you. Right? You shamble the guy. Do you lose the mitzvah? Did you do, the averah of lo tisna et achicha b'levavecha? One of the opinions says, absolutely. I hate you in my heart. I add another level, I hate you in my mouth. Right? So there for sure, I have the isur of lo tisna et achicha b'levavecha. Rambam says no. Lo tisna et achicha b'levavecha means if I hate you only in my heart. If I come to your face and tell you how I feel, I didn't do the averah. Why? You still hate him in your heart. And the answer is, Al-Chachamim explain that what Rambam is teaching is that a hatred that is in the heart only can only metastasize, can only foment, can only become more and more and more toxic. Because there's no release, there's no expression, there's no opportunity for the other person to explain themselves. And that hatred, as you keep it inside, it grows and grows and grows until there's no solution. But if I walk up to your face and I tell you exactly how I feel, then at least perhaps, number one, I've got it out, better out than in. And number two, it gives you an opportunity to say, oh, I'm so sorry. I recently had a conversation with someone, and the guy was very upset at someone else. And I said to this other person, I said, I understand that in every position, in every place, there's always someone who's big dog, who's the alpha male, who needs to be the leader. And I said, and in this situation, this person is the leader. So if the other guy comes into his territory, tries to be an alpha, it's not going to work. So maybe that guy should rather be somewhere else. Anyway, 2 days go by, the guy comes up to me, I'm so upset at you, I can't believe it, you threw me under the bus. I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, you said that I'm the alpha male. I was talking about the other guy. I was telling him that he doesn't belong in your space because you're the leader here, you're running the company. The guy's like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, okay. 2 days the guy's walking around with hatred, angry, screaming. In his mind, I wasn't talking to him at all. I was talking to the other guy. How long did it take to clear that up? 60 seconds. But because he didn't say anything, what happened? 2 days of hatred. By the way, that's a good scenario. Because after 2 days, he came to tell me. What if he waited a week, or 2 weeks, or 3 weeks? You know what happened? If he waited 3 weeks, he would never come back. He'd be that guy that just stops coming to shul. Just doesn't actually say, I'm really insulted, I was really hurt, that you did that, that you said that. Chalas, it's over. So Rambam says, the isur of lo tisna et achicha b'levavecha is that the Torah was saying, don't do this, because holding it in is only going to have, it's a one-way road. There's no turning around on that road to ever reconcile or figure a way back. And yet over here, my friends, we're seeing perhaps exactly the opposite. We're seeing that the brothers decided not to speak to him. Chalas, they don't want to talk. So I think the answer is that the machloket between Harambam and other Rishonim, perhaps one could say that actually it depends on the scenario that one finds oneself in. Now, even if that's not an explanation, pshat and machloket, if that's not the reasoning for their disagreement, I still think it's relevant to put this down. And that is, there are times, there are places where saying something is going to do nothing. And I can prove that. The Gemara says, En mefaisin adam b'sha'at ka'aso. You don't try and appease someone in the time of their anger. They can't hear you. They can't see you. There's no listening. They want to burn you up alive. So when a person's in an angry state, they can't hear. Let me ask you a question. Imagine we did not live in a world of email, of phones, of WhatsApp, of text. We didn't live in that world. We lived in a world before that, a time when there was no communication between two different places. Some of us in this room actually lived in a time like that. A time, right? There was a time where you didn't just pick up the phone. I remember when my parents, we would ask about calling Israel, family, cousins, or whatever, and they'd be like, can't call Israel, it's too expensive. You only called Israel if it was an emergency. Remember that? Right? Those were the times. And you go a little bit before that, and you had to call and ask the operator to connect you. Right? And the operator, this person operating the switchboard, you had to tell them exactly. Then there was a time before that, right, where there was no phones, and you had to pay per letter on the telegram. Stop. Stop, right? You had to decide exactly, and that's how you knew the biggest chacham, the biggest Gemara guy, could whittle it down to like one word. Right? Because they were able to, the famous story about this yeshiva guy who's walking down the street, and he walks in, very learned man. He walks in, he sees the fish store. He says to him, excuse me, he goes, I'm offended by your sign. The guy says, offended by my sign? He goes, yeah, it's so many extra words. He says, what do you mean? He says, come outside. Takes the guy outside, a fishmonger. He says, look at what it says. It says, fresh fish sold daily here. He goes, I don't understand. He goes, you think there's one person on this block that thinks you're selling spoiled fish? Obviously, if you're selling fish, it's going to be fresh. Who's going to sell spoiled fish? Guy says, you know something? Learned man, you're right. Crosses out the word fresh. Fish sold daily here. The next day the rabbi's coming by, he goes, look, I'm very offended by your sign. He goes, really, why? He goes, it's just so silly. He goes, is there anyone on the block who can't smell that you're selling fish? I can smell it all the way down to Delancey Street. Right? The guy says, you're 100% right. Crosses out fish. He goes, look, next time, I'm offended by your son. Sold. He goes, what are you giving stuff away? Erases the sold. Right? He goes, daily. You have to tell them the days you're open, you're open. The days you're not open, it says closed. Daily. Here, what are you going to be selling it somewhere else? The guy takes down the whole sign. So they were good at minimizing language, so fantastic. Telegram, small. Okay? And I always say this, Baruch Hashem, we live in a generation where talk and text is free. You don't have to worry about how many minutes you spoke on the phone because your plan is unlimited. Shtabach Shemo. I was thinking to myself, must be with the introduction of women CEOs, we had the concept of unlimited talk. Our rabbis tell us that women are excellent at talking. Why? Because they're communication beings. They know how to explain things to one another. They don't sit there angry. They talk to one another. They express to one another. They could sit on the phone all day. I see my daughter while she's cooking. She has the thing on. What are you doing? What are you talking about? They talk about nothing for hours. It's wonderful. She's cooking together with her friend somewhere else, talking about nothing. It's wonderful. It means that they found a way of communicating, of creating closeness. Fantastic. So talking more, talking less, talking not at all, there's a place for all of those things. When it comes to your wife and kids, always err on the side of talking more. When it comes to talking about people, always err on the side of talking not at all. And when it comes to things that you must say, or that you should say, then you talk less. The brothers understood, Vayisneu oto. It's not that they were upset. They hated him. They understood that any talk whatsoever would further exacerbate the problem. They couldn't speak to him. But what was their intention? Their intention was lishalom. The Torah's telling you, it's being me'id, that they could not speak echad bapeh ve'echad balev. My friends, but I ask you, but look at the story. Were they right or wrong? What happens in the end? What happens in the end? It builds and builds to the point where the hatred is so strong and they've never talked about it. And the reason why they didn't talk about it was for shalom. What happened? They sold him. They came this close to killing him. I think the message, my friends, is clear. A person has to be able to recognize that there is a weapon of mass destruction, a weapon of mass construction, and a weapon of mass instruction. And it lives right here. You could destroy a relationship with conversations with words that you didn't need to say. By the way, you know when I'm giving such fantastic advice, you'd be surprised. You know I need to tell people to shut up the most? Not to ruin a family, not to create division at weddings. Got to tell one side. It's one nice. It's not relevant. They want this, they said this, he said that, we went here. Is it going to matter? In 10 minutes, is it going to matter? She wants to walk around in circles. I said, who cares? She's Ashkenaz, she wants to walk around in circles. Let her walk around in circles. Just think about it this way. That means that for the rest of her life, her world will revolve around you. Shut your mouth. These moments are moments of such intense. You know when else I have to tell people to shut up? At Shivas. You have brothers or sisters fighting over something, over how the burial, over how the Shiva, over where to sit. And I just, guys, it's not the time. It's not going to matter. For the sake of shalom. That's what your mother's soul and father's soul needs to see. A bunch of brothers fighting at the Shiva. We know the Neshama is here. Do you want her to walk away? Do you want him to walk away feeling like he left a fragmented, fractured family? Or could you at least get together to bury him in peace? Even Yishmael and Yitzchak bury their father together. And he gives the right, and he honors Yishmael, honors Yitzchak to go first. My friends, I want you to imagine a big knob. Some of you are thinking of people you know. I want you to imagine a knob, like a dial. And I want you to imagine that it says on the one side of the dial, speak a lot. On the other side of the dial it says, don't speak at all. And the other middle of the dial says, speak a little. And I want you to imagine that wherever you go into a situation, your hand is on that dial and you can make a decision as to where the arrow points. Maybe if they would have spoken to him a little bit more. Maybe if they would have vented a little bit more. Who knows? I think perhaps we're learning over here that the best of intentions, where someone is saying to themselves, it's not going to matter. They're never going to listen. It's not going to help. The person is a piece of garbage. And then they start launching in. Sometimes to speak a little bit would say a lot. So I think the lesson over here is very powerful. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen.